My name is Tim Poole. I'm a species at Risk Biologist with the Wildlife Branch at the Department of Natural Resources and Northern Development. So today we are at the Broomhill Wildlife Management Area. That's in southwestern Manitoba, just north of Melita. I've been coming down here for 3 years as part of the monitoring for a project we're working on with the Manitoba Wildlife Federation, introducing cattle grazing to this wildlife management area in particular, and the Landgrove Wildlife Management Area on the west side of Lake Manitoba. This morning I've been out doing what we call point counts. These are 5-minute counts where we detect and record every bird within a 200-metre radius of each specific set point. And the idea there is that we can, at the moment, we haven't quite had grazing start on this wildlife management area. The idea is we're going to build up a baseline of data to see what is here. And hopefully over time, once we introduce grazing, we're going to see changes in the different species and the abundances of birds. And hopefully those changes will sort of make a shift in equilibrium between birds which are more associated with shrub habitats and birds which are more associated with grasslands. Because native grasslands in particular are one of the most threatened ecosystems here in Canada. And when we don't manage these native grasslands, we start to lose the specialness of them, and the specialness of the species that associate with them. And in this case, it's the birds. There are others. There are plants. There are butterflies. There are arthropods. There's so many species which associate with native prairie. And native prairie evolved over time with bison grazing. They evolved with wildfire and these natural processes. And we're losing these natural processes. If we lose these natural processes, we get scrub encroachment. And scrub encroachment for particular species, especially grassland birds, is not a good thing because it shades out, it removes habitat, but also it brings in an element of threat that these birds cannot basically put up with within their breeding habitats. What we need to do is to introduce some sort of management, and that's why we're here today, is to start that process. And what we're trying to do is, because we're losing these more open grasslands across Manitoba, we're trying to kind of move the dial back. And we're trying to sort of get back to that equilibrium where we're creating habitat for these more specific grassland birds. And there's a number of species at risk that we find in these grassland ecosystems. And we found some of them today, but we still need to sort of move that dial back towards those species at risk to retain the habitat for the ones that are here, but also to increase the habitat potentially for other species at risk which are currently not here, but would have been here historically. So for example, this morning we've had Sprague's pipit, we've had bobolink, and we've also had baird sparrow as well. And that's definitely more of a species of open grasslands. But we want to get back to having other species here which are even more strongly associated with open grasslands. For example, the chestnut-collared longspur, which we don't currently find here on the wildlife management area, but you would just have to go a few miles from here down towards the Poverty Plains and you would find that species. Loggerhead shrike, there are loggerhead shrike again regionally. They did breed here historically, but we haven't had a record of a breeding loggerhead shrike here for a number of years. And the other species would be ferruginous hawk. They nest in trees or on artificial platforms. There is actually an artificial platform for ferruginous hawk over there. But again, that's a species which they actually feed on ground squirrels. They really specialise on feeding on ground squirrels. For the ground squirrels to thrive, they need open habitat, and that means the ferruginous hawk to set up a nest in the area will need to have that as well, those open grounds. And finally, the other species is burrowing owl, which is obviously very threatened in Manitoba, and we are in an area where there are some birds being released. And if we can manage this site a bit better, maybe in the future we'll get burrowing owl back breeding here as well. This is obviously a vision, and it's something that would take a long time. Things don't happen overnight. So what we're trying to do is prevent this succession to a kind of a climate's habitat that would be deciduous forest and scrub habitats. And those habitats are valuable for certain species, they're valuable for certain birds. But that's not what we feel that should be happening here. This is native prairie. And native prairie was always retained, it was kept in a certain state You would have these successions, but again, these processes, these natural processes, would push everything back towards what they're meant to be. And so in order to prevent this becoming forest, we need to do something. We need to manage it. We need to disturb the ecosystem, as it were, because that's what the bison were doing. They were walking through, they were selecting areas to graze, areas that were really lush. They would come in, they would graze them, and that would prevent scrub encroachment. It would prevent the succession to forest, but it would also retain these habitats for these species which evolved effectively with the bison. So that's why we are so keen to do this, because these prairies, they're so rare now. We're losing them at an alarming rate at times. And this is one parcel which we can influence. So that's why we're doing this. We're doing this to improve things for Manitoba's most threatened wildlife. And that's why we're working on this project now with the Manitoba Wildlife Federation to improve these habitats and to hopefully create more of a future for these birds within this landscape, specifically at the Broomhill Wildlife Management Area.